the second question on 2017, students had to write a complete class, and it opened with an interface, which, okay, technically we don't have interfaces now, so this would no longer be tested. The only there's hardly any impact of this interface at all. I mean, it just shows you the signatures of the methods that get problems a string and next problems a void, which honestly we could have figured that out from their sample code anyway. So it's not a big deal by any means that this is an interface. So don't let that scare you. So we see right here that we need to have a next problem method. We need to have a get problem method that returns a string, and this is how it's formatted. There's two numbers handed to the constructor. They're known as first integer and second integer. And it's going to be always read as a string. First integer times second integer times is all caps. And every time you call next problem, the second integer gets one bigger. So the first integer stays the same, the second one gets one bigger. This is one of those problems. I remember the kids coming back and talking about it, the next day or 48 hours later or whatever. And there was all this discussion of, did you make first integer final? It has to be final. Or did you make second integer static? It has to be static. And neither of those things are true. Okay, so I don't see anything here that says second integer isn't possessed, individually by MultPractices. So that's probably a point deduction, I would imagine, if you actually did make it static. It doesn't say anything to that effect. And I think if you did make first integer final, I think they'd allow it. I don't think it would be penalized because there's nothing really that's like a counter case to it, but there's definitely nothing in the directions that says that it should be final, like that it can't change or anything. So I don't try to put stuff in that you don't see a need for. Okay, like if there's something in here that's a trick, they're going to draw your attention to it, right? Just think of the previous problem. Like it was a trick by the College Board to put that 0 in there. They could have just said handle positive numbers. The fact that they put 0 in there was a trick, but they drew your attention to it. They showed it to you as an example. Like if there's a problem where we might potentially have a null pointer exception, they always put null on the page somewhere. They draw your attention to it. If they wanted you to make first integer final, they would have told you about it. Okay, and there's definitely no reason to make anything static in this problem. All right, so just keeping those little things in mind. We're writing public class MultPractice, and the kids that took this test had to write implements study practice. Okay, so you will definitely not write that line in 2020. Okay, so interfaces have been removed from the AP exam, so that's not going to be tested. Public MultPractice, this is my constructor. Okay, same name as the class, has to accept exactly 2 integers. Okay, no more, no less. And those 2 integers represent what the directions we're calling first integer and second integer. So I think I'll just call them private and first and second for short. Okay. And then I'm just going to go ahead and initialize first with whatever value I brought in first. In my case, that was A, and second will be initialized with B. All right. And now I need to write those 2 methods out that I saw. So there was a public void next problem. That was a parameterless method. This is a modifier method. This is going to take second and increment it, right? Or equals, second plus 1 or plus equals 1. And then there was a public string method called, I think it was get problem, but I think I have to go double check now. I just forgot. Yeah, get problem. And this was also a parameterless method. And this just every time gives back a string literal. And the string literal is the first value. And then we see a space and times in all caps. And another space, and then we see a second. And you guys remember, like, they don't read comments on your test, so don't put comments in with arrows and say like I put a space there. Like they're not going to grade that crazily, and you might just mess it up or something. So just they know if you put a space there. Don't freak out over it. Okay. And in all honesty, I bet if you forgot that space, they wouldn't even care. Okay. In all honesty, so. Little things like that. I don't know. I don't even know if it would matter. All right, so see those problems that printed out. Notice how the 13 showed up twice, and then it jumped to 15. That's exactly in connection with how they were calling the methods over here with the next problem in sequence. This was an incredibly easy problem. It's kind of amazing that there wasn't even like a part B here or anything. So you know, you did have to write the word implements because it was an interface, and we won't see that any longer. But yeah, otherwise this is a pretty straightforward